The U.S. House Committee on Foreign Affairs held a tense and emotional congressional hearing on what several lawmakers described as the ongoing genocide against against Christians in Nigeria. From allegations of stalled action in Abuja to warnings of possible sanctions, the session brought some of the strongest language yet from Washington. Arise international correspondent Adefemi Akinsanya reports.
Her 5 children that she left below were crying, and in her presence, they were being slaughtered.
Lawmakers in Washington pressed U.S. officials and expert witnesses on what they called an escalated campaign on religiously motivated killings in Nigeria.
Nigeria has signaled that the law is optional and targeting Christians is fair game. And despite the pleas and cries of the Nigerian people and many Nigerian lawmakers, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was convicted on all charges. For fiscal year 2025, the U.S. has requested nearly $8 billion for sub-Saharan Africa. Why should our tax dollars support governments that refuse to protect their own people? Is our aid aiding a genocide?
Longtime religious freedom advocate Nina Shia walked the committee through the timeline of Nigeria's designation as a country of particular concern, noting that the Tinubu administration is yet to make meaningful action.
The next step in this process requires the president to adopt a policy response. This in turn got the attention of Nigeria's President Tinubu, who said he is willing to work with the U.S. Until now, he has not shown the political will to stop this Fulani violence.
The hearing also spotlighted media scrutiny, with Congressman Bill Huzienga referencing this interview with Arise News as part of the evidence guiding his concerns.
I think you saw my passion on this earlier. But there are serious issues, and part of that interview from Arise TV, one of the other questions to me was, well, doesn't the CPC damage Nigeria economically in a way that is going to disincentivize economic growth and foreign companies coming into the country? And my answer to them was actually, I think the current state of violence is as much a deterrent.
For balance, Democratic Representative Sarah Jacobs reminded lawmakers that violence in Nigeria cuts across religious lines, affecting Christians and Muslims alike.
In the Kebbi State kidnapping, we're all Muslim girls. So violence affects everyone, and false narratives perpetuate harmful stereotypes and motivate tensions and violence based on religious identity.
As the committee turned to solutions, analysts called for stronger leadership from both Abuja and Washington.
It is important to appoint a Nigerian ambassador to the United States to improve its international engagement and manage narratives about its security realities. It's critical for President Tinubu to appoint a capable Nigerian ambassador to the U.S. If the Trump administration proceeds with unilateral military action in Nigeria, it could endanger the Christians it aims to protect and worsens divisions along religious lines.
And if the urgency wasn't already clear, lawmakers warned that sanctions may be on the table if Nigeria fails to act decisively.
Think of us as partners. You know, yes, we do have the ability to levy sanctions, and you may not like it, but we're doing it because we care about the people in your country that are being slaughtered.
A bipartisan message that without swift reforms, accountability, and protection for all communities, U.S.-Nigeria relations could face new pressure points. Adefemi Akinsanya, Arise News.
Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is the same, our one and only Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin.
So
good morning, Ayon. Good morning, Vimai.
I have to say, do you know what? Since the screen started, the number of people asking for your phone number, they said, I don't think people were sitting down when she stands up. This is what she looks like.
Did you dash them? Hope you didn't dash them.
No, I would never do that.
Are you serving as an agent?
No company. No,
since you are not a supplier of phone
I'm not a supplier. I didn't agree. I just said,
I appreciate
if destiny allows your paths to cross, our office is at such and such and such place.
You are not running a quasi-matchmaking operation.
That's what she's doing. That's what she's doing. Thank you all, and good morning to you viewers. Let me tell you what is happening around the world. So we just saw that report there on this US Congressional hearing on what is happening in the United States in terms of the conversations regarding Nigeria and accusations of genocide against our Christian populations there. I will be coming back to the studio for wonderful comments from our wonderful colleagues, but let's continue on with the World Brief. And there have been, of course, mixed reports over the US reversing its decision not to attend the G20 summit in Johannesburg. Now, we do have Adesuwa Giwosage on ground for us, but ahead of that, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa did tell reporters that the US had indicated it was changing its mind over its boycott of the G20 Leaders Summit at the 11th hour and wanted to take part. However, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied that development, and she had very sharp words for Ramaphosa in response. Let's take a listen to what they both had to say.
We have received notice from the United States, a notice which we are still in discussions with them over, about a change of mind about participating in one shape, form, or other.
The United States is not participating in official talks at the G20 in South Africa. I saw the South African president running his mouth a little bit against the United States and the president of the United States earlier today, and that language is not appreciated by the president or his team. The ambassador or the representative of the embassy in South Africa is simply there to recognize that the United States will be the host of the G20. They are receiving that send-off at the end of the event. They are not there to participate in official talks, despite what the South African president is falsely.
Oh, tough words there from Caroline Leavitt telling the entire president that he's running his mouth. Well, US Democrats are outraged, though. That's after US President Donald Trump accused Democratic lawmakers of engaging in seditious behavior punishable by death. Those were his words. He said that they should be arrested after they posted a video in which they told active service members that they should refuse to follow illegal orders. Now, the video features 6 Democratic lawmakers who have previously served in the military or in intelligence roles. Now, their video did trigger 3 Truth Social posts from Trump, and the third one was the one where he said seditious behavior punishable by death. He also reposted a statement that said, "Hang them, George Washington would." Very, very strong words there. Now, this is, again, following Trump's comments. We did see that the House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, as well as the Democratic whip, Catherine Clark, and Democratic caucus chairman, Peter Aguilar, released a joint statement condemning the remarks, which call into question the temperament of a president who has previously threatened military action here in Nigeria. Well, before I come over to my colleagues for their thoughts on the World Brief, let's take a look at our newspaper headlines from across Nigeria and indeed the world. As ever, we begin with the front page of this day. And this day does lead with the conviction of IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu. Now, this is as the Federal High Court sentenced him to life imprisonment. This is after a 10-year terrorism trial. Now, the court ruled that his broadcast incited violence, that it enforced illegal sit-at-home orders, and contributed to the killings and destructions against the southeast of Nigeria. Now, former Senate Minority Leader Enyinya Abaribe condemned the judgment, calling it predetermined plot against the region while calling for calm. Well, we've got a double whammy next. Let's take a look at the Daily Trust and the Daily Independent together. Now, both of these newspapers are reporting also on the aftermath of the conviction of IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu, who, as we've just heard, was sentenced to life imprisonment following a decades-long terrorism trial. Now, the court did find that Kanu's broadcast incited violence and enforced these sit-at-home orders, which they deemed to be illegal, across the southeast. Meanwhile, the Daily Independent notes that Kanu plans to appeal the judgment, which we've already discussed is an option available to him. Now, another double whammy again, we've got the New Telegraph and the Vanguard. Now, both of these papers are looking at the report by the US House of Representatives hearing on Nigerian insecurity and alleged Christian persecution. You do have the Africa Director, Oge Olun, who we referenced in our World Brief segment, talking about how this U.S. crisis is driven by governance failures, banditry and communal clashes, as well as separatist agitation. And it's not just attacks on Christians, we heard her say. Now, lawmakers and experts have called for stronger protection of citizens, while the Tinubu administration had rejected claims behind Nigeria's reinstatement on the United States as a country, by the United States as a country of particular concern. Now, the Daily Sun does report that Kwara State has closed its borders. Not so much its borders, it's closed its schools in 5 local government areas. This is following a series of bandit attacks, including the recent abduction of worshippers from the Christ Apostolic Church in Eruku over in Kwara State. Now, authorities say that the closures aim to protect students while security agencies continue efforts to rescue victims and secure their communities. Now, the Punch this morning, it does lead with the abduction of worshippers from the Christ Apostolic Church in Kwara State, in Okeiga, Kwara State, where bandits reportedly demanded 100 million naira as a ransom per victim. Now, between 30 and 35 people were taken during Tuesday's service. Now, the Christian Association of Nigeria have, of course, condemned the attack, and they have urged swift action. Security agencies are on the ground, while community members are calling for stronger local protection. Also, on the front page of the Punch, we do have the unfortunate news of the death of Olusegun Aaloa, who is, of course, the grandson of Chief Obafemi Aaloa, who died, that is, Segun himself died at the age of 62. The Aaloa family described him as a devoted husband, father, and public servant. President, of course, just along the bottom there, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as well as Ogun State Governor Prince Dapo Abiodun, have all expressed their condolences, praising his contributions to Nigeria, including his long service as Executive Director of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. Now, moving on to UK papers, let's take a look at The Independent. Now, The Independent, as do many other British dailies, leads with this outcome of the UK COVID-19 inquiry, and it did find that Boris Johnson, then Prime Minister, failed to grasp the urgency of the pandemic, leading to delayed lockdowns that cost thousands of lives. The report also blames a chaotic Downing Street culture, criticised rule-breaking by senior officials, and highlights how school closures severely disrupted children's education and well-being. Well, those are your well-briefed stories and your newspaper headlines. Love to hear your thoughts.
Well, there's so much in the news today, but let's begin with the congressional hearing that took place yesterday. And goodness me, I think all eyes were glued on that. The detailed and intellectual manner in which it was conducted, I think, is what struck several people, because the conversation was, well, when did we have these conversations at home? And unfortunately, we haven't used our spaces. We haven't, submitted our own institutions to these kinds of deep engagements. So that takeaway, I think, struck a lot of people. But for me, I think I really sat down and processed the submission from Oge Onugubu, who gave us a nuanced approach and highlighted the complexities of the issues, which is very similar to the conversation we'd been having yesterday when we were saying there are issues around terrorism, there are issues around criminality. I'm glad she even highlighted the Mieti Allah and the complexities around that, because we know that Mieti Allah will continue to say that, well, they're not a terrorist organization. Right. However, there have been splinter groups from that organization. And ultimately, I think she was able to paint the picture, which is becoming clearer, that as financing becomes more difficult for terror, terrorists are now turning to this web of criminality that they were not previously involved with to fund their exploits. So you have this nexus of crime and terror, which now makes it so much more difficult to deal with the root problem. So we continue to unpack that, and we'll see where what resolutions are made. But it's good to see some headway being made and more information being shared. I also loved her submission about there was a submission about the fact that there's no data, because most times the pastors are the ones who are burying these bodies themselves. The police may not even make it to the scene. Right. Now, I'll go very quickly to South Africa, where, for the first G20 summit that's being held on African soil, it's unfortunate that there's this much controversy surrounding the entire thing. We know that Donald Trump had taken the stance that he wasn't going to participate. Then J.D. Vance had said he would go in his place until they said no American delegation would be present at all. Until a diplomatic note was shared yesterday saying that the chargé d'affaires would come and conduct the handover. Now, the G20 presidency is being handed over from South Africa to the United States. And the South African president had previously said, well, he will hand over to an empty chair. He said they have no problems handing it over to an empty chair. The empty chair will be there to signify Donald Trump's absence. And yesterday he'd spoken to say that boycott politics, that's Ramaphosa, had said boycott politics doesn't get anybody anywhere and everybody must be under the tent. However, Vincent Mangwenya, who is the presidential spokesperson, has said that President Cyril Ramaphosa will not hand over to a junior official. So having said that, I think their expression of interest to participate in the G20 has been declined.
There we go.
All right, so talk one on U.S. congressional hearing yesterday. What you mentioned, Vimbai, a lot of people were glued, and if you haven't seen it, I think it's important. I asked the question yesterday on my socials yesterday around the fact that I had mixed feelings about it. One, I was glad that finally stories were being shared and heard, and people had the platform and opportunity to speak. But I think on the other hand, I felt quite disappointed that it had to take the United States Congress for these stories to be heard and shared. And then you asked the question around where is the Nigerian Senate and what role have they taken on since this designation as a country of particular concern, and to be honest, even before the designation, because before the designation, there were stories and calls for intervention in the Middle Belt and in northern Nigeria. And perhaps if they had done their duty, we might not be here where we are called on, where Nigeria has been designated as a country of particular concern. So for me, it was quite, it made it even more glaring of the fact that Nigeria is yet to take the lead on this. We are responsive, we are reactive, but we are not taking the lead. And so I hope that this would, again, they will cause them to react by organizing their own panel of inquiry. Where are the committees on defense? Where are the committees, that would deal with these issues and listen to the voices? For me, the most powerful submissions were the submissions of people who had been affected. So the woman who had come on from the Yelwata killings, who lost 5 of her children. I said it yesterday and I continue to say that until we see the starkness of what is happening in these regions, we might sit down and just think, oh, it's not that bad. It is that bad, and perhaps even worse for some families. And what we're even asking, and I said it yesterday, I still maintain it, that you cannot make a claim or decision on a particular matter if you have not investigated it, or at least you've not shown or demonstrated any efforts to at least hear the voices of the people. Bring those who are directly affected to the table. Yes, there's the academic part, and but it is how it affects the people themselves. Who are the people that are dying? Whose lives are being affected? Let's hear those stories. And so it was really chilling to watch that account, and hopefully it would cause and evoke reaction and response from the Nigerian government. But I hope that we move from a place of reaction and response to a place of proactiveness. Very quickly, education is under attack. That's the truth in Nigeria. Look at what's happened in Kwara State, where schools are now being closed. Today, ASU is said to be going on strike. Whether it's terrorism, whether it's insecurity that's affecting people from going to the classroom or to the schools, we still have the problem on our hands. Whether it is a lack of leadership, a lack of funding, a lack of trust, the problem is that education is under threat in Nigeria, and we must pay serious attention to this. I would say in Kwara State, safety over education, and that's the truth. But it also means that the terrorists are winning, because this is part of what some of them are against, which is education. And it's just a cycle. And if we don't end this, it's not just affecting security, economic activities, but we are killing our young people, and means we're killing our future. And that should not be accepted.
Okay, I want to comment on the international issues, but let me start with the sad news of the passing of Olusegun Awolowo, the grandson of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the Nigerian statesman and sage and leader of the Yorubas. I knew Segun Awolowo fairly. He attended Ogun State University, as he then was, after returning from Switzerland. And then he later, studied law and practiced law, and then had a very distinguished career, in my estimation, serving his country. Under President Obasanjo, he was a special assistant to the president on traditional institutions and indigenous matters. He was retained under the Yar'Adua administration as a special assistant in the Federal Capital Territory Administration, in which capacity he was in charge at a point of transport. And then I think he was later moved to, health. Then he returned to law practice. And then in 2013, the Jonathan administration recalled him to service. I know this because I was the one that made the announcement of the appointment. And he became executive director of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. And again, it was in that National Export Promotion Council that his ability flourished. He was the champion of what was called the Zero Oil Plan. And by that, he meant that, look, we can promote exports. We can make Nigeria not as a place for raw materials, but for finished products, which can also create jobs for our people in Nigeria. And he devoted a lot of energy to that. And of course, having seen his devotion, his commitment, he was retained by the Buhari administration in that capacity. And of course, he was the president of the trade organization leaders in West Africa. And he made a lot of presentations all over the world. But now we've received the sad news of his passing at the young age of 62. He was a grandfather, husband, a very devoted, citizen. So we can only pray that his soul finds peaceful repose. Very quickly on the congressional hearing yesterday, the key points are as follows. One, Nigeria should know that we are not isolated. We are part of an international community. And what happens in Nigeria is also of interest to other countries. To that extent, the intervention by other people in the United States is okay. Second, at that hearing yesterday, chaired by Chris Smith, opinion was divided. They were split. You had people like Oge Onubogo, who has worked at the Wilson Center, who has worked at the United States Institute of Peace, and who is the current head and a director on the African program at the Center for International and Security Studies. As far as I'm concerned, she gave a more robust view, saying that the single story does not recognize the complexity of the Nigerian situation, which is exactly what we have been saying on this table. And, only yesterday, Dr. Olusegun Aganga was talking about the Bermuda Triangle in Nigeria of corruption, of ethnicity, of religion. And all of this can run foot, the development process in the country. And surprisingly, Oge Onubogu made the same point. And then there were others, like Congressman Wisinga, I think that's his name, Usinga, who said that he grew up with Nigerians. He went to school with Nigerians, and that he feels saddened by what is happening in Nigeria. There was Praya, I think that's the name, or some of these names, who was saying that, no, President Trump was overreacting, that the approach that President Trump had adopted, he didn't even give the Nigerian government or the Nigerian community an opportunity to make an input. The same view was expressed by Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs.
Yes.
Whereas you have on the other side, the rep from John James from Michigan, and then Chris Smith, the chairman, and the partner from the Bureau of African Affairs, saying the U.S. has to take action. I think people should just develop the intellectual mind to look at the various dimensions and not just, as Oge Nwabogo pointed out, you assume that Nigeria is just a linear situation. Finally, Trump and sedition. The Sedition Act in the United States was passed by President John Adams in 1798. In 1801, when Thomas Jefferson became president, he abrogated it. But then, of course, there was the Espionage Act of 1917, and then the Sedition Act was reinstated in 1918. And then, of course, you have the Article 94 of the Uniform Code of the U.S. military also talking about sedition. Originally, sedition is you cannot criticize the sovereign. But in this evolution in U.S. jurisprudence, it became you cannot do something against the government of the United States, something that will condemn the United States. But the other side of it is that military officers, either in the US or elsewhere, are not required to obey illegal orders. But the big issue, to summarize, since we're running out of time, is that the US president is saying he will give the death penalty, that people should go and hang the 6 Democrat lawmakers in the House of Reps who were saying soldiers should not obey illegal orders from government or President Trump. Well, the danger is that there have been a lot of high-profile killings in the US, politically motivated. And the concern of Hakeem Jeffries and other members of the Democratic Party and even the leadership of the House is that President Trump may be inciting people to violence.
Yes.
But in any case, we don't seem to have more time. But those are the basic issues in that regard. Thank you very much, Adefemi.
You're most welcome.